I'm Gabby. I head up analytics and insights at Adapt. I love doing cloud and infrastructure events. You have a very keen interest in data, whether it's things like observability or workflow automation, increasingly harnessing things like AI. As for myself, I've spent most of my career as a data scientist. I know that I cannot do my best analytics without the right compute, without the right storage, integration. So I'm really excited to share our insights with you today. I was thinking about some of the things that Jim just presented around the complexity and pace of change that you're working with, building the infrastructure not just for today, but for the future as well. And I remembered a quote. I'm sure some of you are a fan of William Gibson. He's often credited as the father of cyberpunk. And he said, the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. Now, of course, William Gibson at the time was largely talking about macroeconomic trends. But the more I think about this quote, the more I think it's relevant to internally in our organizations. Different teams have different needs, different levels of capability. Different use cases can bring different value and have varying requirements. Data is also increasingly distributed across our infrastructure, and this creates complexity for how we operate. So having a look through your information and understanding some of our research, well, it looks like the three things that really matter for how we approach infrastructure over the next 12 months is rethinking workload management. And this is a strategic decision about having the right assets in the right place for the right reasons. The second is thinking about how we structure our team and enable people and upskill individuals. And the last area, and this is particularly where we see top performers accelerate, is they ask the right questions and they engage the business in new and innovative ways. So this is very much how we're going to structure this presentation. I thought a good place to start is with the workload management, because we saw a fascinating statistic that we've benchmarked over time. What you can see is we asked you, what percentage of you are looking at repatriating something back from the public cloud? And in 2020, that was about 10%. Fast forward now to 2025, a quarter of you are looking at bringing something back. But how much is that something? Well, because we're looking at now that 25%, we take a median. And the median amount to be repatriated is 13%. Doesn't sound like a lot. But in many of your organization, there's a significant amount of compute, a significant amount of storage. Now, there are some managed service providers and private cloud providers that have really good messaging around this. And that messaging is that repatriation might be the wrong term because it implies bringing something back to an old environment. No, we're just moving it somewhere different that's not a hyperscaler. And I think judging by the statistics, that conversation is resonating with a lot of you. So what are we actually bringing back? Well, first is application hosting. And this is mainly those core business, CRM, ERP, HR system applications, those typical monolithic run the business apps. The second is data storage, and you can combine that with the data backup. And some of this is egress, data costs in the public cloud. Some of its compliance and regulation is a bit easier to meet when you have sovereign data. While on the topic of compliance, let's look at the reasons of why we're repatriating. So on aggregate, risk comes up the most. So we want more finite controls over how we deploy security and how we secure infrastructure. The second is cost blowout. And for many organizations here, the public cloud didn't deliver on the cost promise that we expected. And that was mainly perpetuated from a lift and shift model, right? Where we quickly found out that moving something from here to there didn't necessarily make us save costs and didn't make us more agile. As you know, what we had to do was reconsider how we architect for cloud native environments. The last is skill sets to manage. Public cloud providers change a lot over the years. It's an evolving skill set. There's a lot of different certifications, and it's been quite hard to develop skill sets, particularly if you're working in a multi-cloud environment. So this begs the question, where's our infrastructure actually sit? So at Adapt, we have Australia's largest and longest running cloud migration study. So you can see from 2020 to 2025 here, we cover areas like in-house, which is traditional operating in your own data center where applications are manually provisioned. Private cloud is in your own data center or in a co-location. But it's a single tenant environment with multiple resources where we have things like agility, scalability. I think we know public and the hybrid model as well. Now, you've been looking at that for a bit of time now, so you probably noticed that that white box, the public cloud, gets bigger, gets bigger, gets bigger up until 2024. And then what's happened over the past year? Well, it's gone back to pre-COVID times. I will add a footnote to this. This is from the organizations that we surveyed. But we do have significant overlap of respondents from year to year, and that bigger jump is not well described by sample variation in terms of who we survey. So you can see that we're increasingly going into hybrid cloud. So thinking about where infrastructure is located that can add the right value. And get out your phones because I'm going to live poll you on this in a second. It looks like that there's going to be more complexity, right? Operating across multiple environments means it increases our risk surface. It's harder to manage. We've got to focus more on interoperability. So what's not covered by this is how many environments you're actually managing. So Tom, could we bring up the live poll? So have a scan. What I want to know is, what are the environments that you're currently working in? How many? And this isn't just the vendors that you're working with. You might have a hyperscaler where you have multiple environments built on different use cases that have different project teams, different cost structures, and different operational teams that manage them. So I've got some broad buckets there that you can fill out. And Tom, you know, I like to watch this live. I'm a bit of a data geek, so this is going to be fun for me. And we'll just wait for that to come up. I will say while that's coming up, regardless of the type of environment that you work in, there's a couple of things that we find drive modernization across multi-cloud. One of those things is the amount of applications connected through APIs. So we're focusing on productive data flow between applications. The other is application consolidation. So what we actually get is focusing on the applications that can add the most value. So you can see the most popular area there is sort of 3 to 5. Half of us are there. A quarter of us only 1 to 2. So we're working in a singular private cloud and a singular public cloud. We find 4%, so about 8% above 10. And we're going to leave that open. So if most of us are working in sort of that 3 to 5 model, what's the level of unification that we have across those environments? Yep, let's switch it off. So we asked you about your unification, where no unification means individually managed environments. 28% of you have basic, so you've got some common policies. 36% of moderate. So this means that you have shared guidelines, you have some shared policies, particularly in deployment and monitoring. So if we focus on that left-hand side, 85% of organizations' multi-cloud environments are characterized by manual process. They're characterized by a lack of visibility and security practices. This can create significant operational overhead, and it impacts us truly leveraging the agility that our organizations expect from us. It also means that we have a significant amount of labor overhead that we have to pay to manage these. So that's a good lead-in to how we manage people and how we manage our team. So in understanding people and team structure, we firstly wanted to know what you insource, what you outsource, and what you currently have in hybrid. So you can see that overwhelmingly we're insourcing cloud, FinOps, and cost management. That's because we need to hold people accountable, and if we're being responsible for costs, it's got to be close to the business in how we derive and deliver value through that. We can augment this with software, but the team is primarily internal. You can see that help desk appears in the insourcing and the outsourcing area. We are not comfortable to do that hybrid. It creates too much friction to bounce users around, whether it's our internal employees or our customers. You can see SOC, we're increasingly outsourcing, and that makes incredible sense. You only need a penetration tester when you need a penetration tester, not to pay for them the whole year round. SOCs also have really good visibility through a diverse customer base in terms of the emerging threats. Hybrid, you can see application support and DevOps. This often involves internal teams in driving the culture, in driving the pipelines, but we need to augment with external consultants or with vendors for specific tool chains. So that's where we have skill sets currently, internally and externally in our organization. So what are the skill sets that we expect our internal team to have? And we had a look through a bunch of our qualitative information around what people are talking about, what are the jobs and the attributes that people need. And firstly, you can see cloud architects. So we actually need the people that can build the solutions in effective ways. You can see AI and ML operations there. Moving from a proof of concept to full deployment of AI is incredibly difficult. The scalability, the security, the governance, handling those flows. So we need a highly skilled team working in a cross-functional way to manage that. Lastly, we see security and DevSecOps. So embedding security as a foundational layer, not as an afterthought. And we had a cybersecurity event recently, and someone said something really interesting on a panel. They said DevSecOps is failing in a lot of organizations. And the reason why it's failing is because security is just being brought in a little bit earlier. It's not truly being brought in at the start and embedded into everything that we do. So what are the attributes that we're really looking for? Well, in terms of skill sets, we're looking for financial savviness in our engineers. So we want them to have understanding how architectural choices affect speed, but also affect costs and create financial accountability and drive that through the team. The second is customer-focused outcomes, where we want people to understand how infrastructure underpins and embeds in digital experiences. The last is empower others with data. So understanding that putting data in the hands of decision makers is really important, but also how our team use data to empower the rest of the organization to underpin business cases. So what are our barriers to skills? Well, first is insufficient skills in the marketplace. And it's incredibly hard to get specialists in particular areas like DevOps at the moment, and that inflates the cost of labor. The second is the time to upskill, because a lot of our organizations and a lot of our team are running quite busy and real lean. And that feeds into the last point, too many specialties. So when we have the time to upskill, there's so many platforms. There's so much choice, so many different things that we can do, and it's hard to pick the skills that we need for now, as well as building for the future. Talking about teams and skills, one of the top skills for you in the executive layer is asking the right questions of the business in order to deliver value. So one of the things that we see top performers do is they shift the conversation from cost to value. We're very much, for a lot of our organizations, having cost-focused discussions at the moment. You can see that 69% of infrastructure leaders are investing in cloud cost optimization. So rationalizing those assets, getting the right sizing of infrastructure, streamlining, creating efficiencies. 65% are investing in observability. Now, observability is key to that cost optimization, because it allows us to discover assets, see what we're actually using, and it's the first step of linking back to business value. Last area, and Jim mentioned before the rise in compute that we need. On average, you tell us that you're going to need a 24% increase on power consumption over the next 2 years. I'm excited. I can see Bevan Slattery is going to be talking soon, not right now, but shortly. I want to know how we're going to pay for that, because 24% is a significant impact to our operating costs and potentially flow on to our customers. So there's some opportunity gaps in having that value-focused conversation. 36% of leaders, only 36, say that they're effective at linking cloud spend to value. And this is a major challenge in how we articulate impact. And one of the reasons behind that is half of the organizations that we surveyed have no chargeback or showback model, which means that it's difficult to work with business teams to hold them accountable for using the infrastructure in proactive ways to meet those business outcomes. And when it comes to FinOps practices, 33% of you have not implemented FinOps at all. And an additional 20% have only been in the early stages of FinOps implementation. And this is not a lack of intent. I don't think it's well defined, particularly with the differences between organizations. What are the tools that we need? What are the processes that we need to develop? Who needs to be involved? What are we actually going to track when it comes to business value? And then how are we going to continually prove value over time? So one of the ways that we can shift from that cost to value conversation is understand our stakeholders and engage with them better. And I'm going to give you an insight into the voice of some of your stakeholders, just one per key stakeholder. So for the CIO, their number one initiative this year is back office modernization. So a lot of our experiences and how we harness efficiency pins on us updating some of those large backend applications. I was talking to a large government organization that has an ERP system which is 30 years old, 30. Think about the risk attached to that, the sunken investment, as well as how we're going to uplift that to measure value. And for a lot of organizations, this sits in a 2 to 5 year life cycle. The reason why I want to bring that up is because when we talk to people that head up digital experience for our customers and for our employees, they say 45% of them say that they're expected to show value in under a year. So those two worlds are going to collide, right? And if you think about it with a digital leader, a lot of your organizations are achieving that rapid value by shifting from a project to a product mindset. So projects can be poorly handed over and poorly financed when they move to business as usual until the next big project comes along. Digital products, like an application, can have continuous micro innovations with different value metrics attached to them. The issue that I brought up before with having the cost to value conversation is when we talk to CFOs, they say on average 40% of technology in your organizations is wasted. It's not in use. So anything that we do that's going to bring new initiatives, that's going to put forward new business cases needs to be stronger than ever. Because particularly with the macroeconomic pressures, CFOs are much more involved in technology decisions, as you know. So the good news is when we collaborate with these business stakeholders, you value the language of the business. We asked you what metrics resonate in building your business cases, being secure and compliant, and we see boards increasingly obsessed with risk, whether it's financial risk or security risk, and cost reduction and experience. This shows that we're leading to the financial health and user satisfaction in the infrastructure that's going to underpin the organization. The things that don't matter as much in those business cases, well, they matter for us, right, in the technology space. But we've got to think how we link developer productivity to cost optimization, or them focusing more on secure and trusted outcomes, or interoperability underpins experience. So those things need to be messaged up to some of those high value metrics. So what are the questions that we should ask ourselves? And I've segmented this by the topics that we've done today. So in workload management, do our workloads enable innovation? So do we have the right balance between innovation, speed, and the value that it brings, as well as future-proofing our infrastructure? What lessons have we learned that we can apply to AI? Things like cost blowout, things like modular architectures, things like engineering the right pipelines and integration. How can we take all that rich knowledge and put it towards an organizational impact and high focus on AI? When it comes to people in the team, how do we optimize our in-house skills, right? And if we're creating operational efficiency, it isn't necessarily about headcount out of the business. What do people do with the time that they're given back in the day? And then with outsourcing, how do we properly leverage from our providers, from our partners, their knowledge base, what they're seeing in the market, what they're seeing industries do really well? What are the skills that we need today? And that's crucial because the skills for tomorrow, look, I don't know. I don't think any of us know what the skills that we need for tomorrow. But in building the skills for tomorrow, what a lot of people I talk about have found that we want people that have the appetite to learn, the appetite to change, are enthusiastic about what our businesses do. Then let's fix the skills that we have for now and worry about tomorrow down the line. Last is business value, which we talked about. And how can we position cloud and infrastructure as a business enabler to underpin initiatives? How does it lead to business experience? And what are the metrics and timelines that we're going to do? How are we going to track this? Are we going to develop our own metrics, or are we going to work with the rest of the business and anchor to their metrics? Can we see how infrastructure in a digital experience platform links to things like NPS? The last area that we see that people are interested about in developing their strategies and delivering on these three things is where they sit in comparison to their peers. So something we've done with your survey information is we've anonymized it and we've aggregated it by industry, by size of organization. So we've got a QR code there. You can scan and there's a sample report. It covers things like where your workloads sit. Do you have more in the public cloud or in hybrid environments compared to people of the same industry? How do you manage cloud spend? Does this change by size of organization? Do they have different strategies around emphasis on governance or emphasis on collaboration as organizations get bigger or smaller? Last is FinOps adoption, which is some of those areas that we cover. So how effective are you at chargeback, showback models? How effective are you at linking spend to value in the organization? Because some organizations might feel like they're behind, but the industry as a whole might need that catching up to do as well.